and welcome to episode 4 of my project to build the APC from the film Aliens. In this episode, I'll be finishing the 1/24th scale model of the APC with its full interior and lighting. In the next episode, I'll finish the 1/16th scale radio controlled version, so make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss seeing this beast on the move. Then the files will be available for you to purchase and download from my website, just like Slave One. Okay, that's all coming later. Let's crack on with the 1/24th scale version. In the last episode I got everything printed and test assembled, and it looked pretty good. I even threw in a torch to get some idea of how the front lights would look. Lighting the APC is something I've been dreading, but after a lot of research and deliberating I decided to go with these 20mA micro LEDs. They're small enough to fit in all the locations I need, but sorting all the spaghetti out is going to be an absolute nightmare. To power them, I'm going to use a 9V battery, which will be housed within the APC. Of course, I will need to add resistors to drop the voltage so the LEDs don't blow, but that's just some basic maths. Using Ohm's law, I can work out what size resistors I need. I decided to divide the lights up into two groups. The first group has 3 LEDs for the interior and 2 for the tail lights. The second group has the 4 lights mounted in the nose of the APC. I decided to use a resistor rated at 100 ohms for each group, as this was the closest I had that would protect the LEDs from blowing. The rear lights of the APC will be mounted inside the clear cast light units prior to painting. Those for the interior will be glued in at the same time. The LEDs for the nose lights have to be glued in after painting and after the clear acetate screens have been glued into place. And here they are. The tail and interior lights have been installed and are working well. In hindsight, my interior lighting design was inadequate. Hopefully you'll learn from my mistake. I had to chase out the wiring runs, but this is a working prototype to find the best solutions to the problems I find along the way. By the time the files are available, all these problems will be resolved. You may decide on a different solution for your APC, maybe more interior lights, maybe a separate power supply. At least you'll have a proven starting point. Right, now we can start priming the parts.
Alright people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Affirmative.
I'm just using a regular grey car primer from a rattle can. These are the parts for the rear crew compartment. All the interior parts have been carefully cleaned up, filled where necessary and test fitted to the main hull. These are the parts for the central commander's section. Breaking the parts down into sections makes the process more manageable and less confusing. The gunners' and drivers' positions are also primed. The parts that need to be primed all over are left to dry, flipped and primed again. The wheels and tyres are also primed, together with their back plates. The tyres need a coat on both front and back faces. Then I spray selected areas of the inside of the hull and all of the underside of the exterior. Once dry, the main hull is flipped and the exterior is primed. At this stage, none of the detail parts have been added. This is so I can check the surface for any areas that need attention and get them sorted prior to paint. Here's some of the highlights. I took my time carefully cleaning up these parts before priming, and it's certainly paid off. There's so much detail here, I'm really pleased with how these parts came out. They will be buried within the APC, but at least they'll be available for others to get creative and display their APC to the best effect. And here's the main hull and turrets ready for paint. It's great to see it in one unified colour. The holes are ready for the ancillary parts to be added, but that'll be later, so they don't get knocked off while I work on the rest of the APC. The turrets just snap into place with the magnets I installed in the last episode. The primed wheels and tyres get sprayed matte black from a rattle can, just as a base coat. They'll be tweaked later in the painting process. Okay, now we're ready for some colour, but what colour should I paint the APC? We do have these photos of the real APC taken back in the day, and as you can see it's a kind of olivey, drab, brownish, greeny sort of colour. Some photos have it slightly greener, but the real thing is certainly a green base colour, verging on brown. Back in 2023, a 1/12 scale filming miniature of the APC came up for auction at Prop Store and was well photographed. It looks great, but green it isn't. The wheel discs are brown, and overall it's much browner than the full-size vehicle it's built to represent. Why? I don't know. Maybe to allow for the lighting on the set, who knows? If you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments. This model differs in many ways from the full-size APC, but won't be used as my colour reference. In the interest of trying to use readily available paints and materials for this build, I'm using regular Tamiya acrylics. I called in at my local model shop and bought a selection of colours that I felt could work well with the APC. Some had promise, some were just way out, but looking at the jars wasn't enough. I also had a tin of Humbrol Olive Drab, which may well have been used on the miniature as a base colour. Some say Humbrol Brown Bess was used, which judging by the colour of the wheels may well be right, but a long way from the colour I want. So I prepared some colour swatches on a sheet of styrene. It was a bit like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but ultimately I decided to go with Tamiya XF27 Black Green. Black Green would be my primary exterior colour, with the interior painted with Tamiya XF13 Japanese Army Green. Tamiya XF81 would serve as a lighter green, should I need it. Winsor & Newton matte varnish would ultimately seal the model. The interior bulkheads were painted in Japanese Army Green with my trusty Harder and Steenbeck. These areas would need painting before the completed interior parts could be added. I then worked through methodically spraying the interior parts the same base colour of XF13. The floor panels were sprayed in the darker shade of Tamiya Black Green, as well as the rest of the exterior parts. I found it easier to spray small batches of parts, so that I didn't end up tripping over myself. The front and back faces of the wheels were followed by the main turret, which containing a magnet fortunately attached itself well to a tin of Humbrol, making life a little easier. The interior parts were then carefully hand-painted with a selection of green acrylics to add variation. The seat belts were painted black with aluminium hardware. The commander's console was painted to match screen grabs from the movie. The movie was referenced as much as possible, but a little artistic license had to be taken in some areas. The wiring to the driver's controls was added with fine fuse wire, and the switchgear was picked out with a fine brush. I decided to add a clear styrene sheet to the back of the screen holes for the commander's monitors. These panels were glued in place with micro crystal clear, which is initially white but does dry clear. I sprayed the exterior of the front of the hull with black green so I could superglue the clear styrene sheet to the inside of the light openings. The micro LEDs I'd wired earlier were then glued into place and tested with those to the interior and rear of the APC. The wiring was now complete and the interior could now be fitted. Careful dry fitting prior to paint meant this process went really well. The wiring was also well concealed behind the panels. I'm sure others more able than me will get far more creative with the interior lighting. It'll be great to see what you guys come up with. I'm really pleased with the look of the interior. It's a good match to the movie set, but there's certainly scope for super detailing. Now on to painting the exterior. I've added the remaining details, including the photo etching of the front, the grab handles, and the remaining 3D printed parts. This then just gets a solid base coat, no fancy stuff going on here. I'm glad I went with this Tamiya Black Green. Let me know what you think in the comments. There's a lot to paint on this model. I think ultimately I went through 3 pots of black green and 2 of Japanese Army Green, so buy plenty when you paint yours. I bought these stencils to try and add some colour variation by mottling the Japanese Army Green over the top. The big ones were way too coarse, but I thought I'd give the one by AK a go. After blundering around for a bit, I decided to ditch the stencils and just freehand the mottling. This was definitely the way to go. It actually got quite therapeutic. I mottled all of the exterior parts and then gave everything a coat of matte varnish. There are some prominent markings on the front of the hull, and I decided to cut a stencil for them on my silhouette cutter. I cut the stencil for the larger radio-controlled 1/16 APC at the same time. The stencils were carefully applied and masked up with tape to prevent overspray. Then I just used a Vallejo off-white sprayed in thin layers, taking care not to flood the stencil. Next came weathering with oils. For the APC, I'm just going to use varying mixes of burnt umber and French ultramarine. These are just mixed on a palette with white spirit and then applied to the surface. I then use a paper towel to dab away any excess. This leaves a really good mottle pattern behind. The long work time and ability to reactivate the oils allows you to go back and adjust your work. This is a great process to add streaking and dirt effects to the model. It's also a lot of fun and pretty hard to screw up. Rather than go for chipping, which a lot of armour modelers seem to like, I decided to just show wear on the obvious exposed edges, mainly at the front of the APC. To do this, I used a 6B pencil, gently dragged along the edges to get the effect I was after. This worked really well and gave a great result. The wheel units could now be finally assembled, having had the same weathering treatment as the hull. Everything just snapped into place, just as the test assembly. The weathered hull looked great, and it was time for the final assembly. I'd added the searchlight and photo-etched grille. The wheel units and turrets again just snapped into place, held securely by the magnets. This just left me the floors to add, to finally close up the APC. These have been heavily weathered with oils and with the pencil, as they were high wear areas. With the seats glued into place, they were ready to be fitted. First of all, the rear floor goes in, making sure to get it the right way round. Then the central floor with the commander's seat, followed by the nose section with the driver's foot pedals. The gunner's floor with the seats goes in last. The cutout is for the 9-volt battery access. The tolerances were such that this sits flush with the underside of the hull. It'd be simple enough to close this off with a styrene panel if you weren't going to add lighting. Okay, let's power this sucker up and see how the lights look. The 9-volt battery is secured in with Velcro and is a perfect fit in the cavity. The lights are really great in the nose and the tail of the APC. They turned out to be less effective in the interior though. Overall, I'm pleased with how they look. Not bad for a beginner. The wiring was something I really didn't enjoy, but it's not essential to the overall look of the model, just an added bonus. And with the floors and driver's door added, the build for the 1/24th Aliens APC is complete. I think I've captured the APC pretty well. I'm so happy with my colour choice. The weathering and variation in the panels really helps add interest to the otherwise flat surfaces. This is my prototype. Using the lessons I've learned along the way, the files I'll be releasing shortly will be slightly different here and there, to make life a bit easier for those of you wanting to take on this build. Let me know what you think of my APC in the comments. My APC is as screen accurate as I can make it, and now it's ready and waiting for its companion, the dropship. Yes, I will be designing and building the dropship as well, also in 1/24th scale. But this project isn't over yet. There's still the 1/16th scale radio controlled APC. That's now complete, and the video for it will be out next week, so make sure you subscribe to my channel and have the notification bell on to catch it as soon as it goes live. After that, the files will be made available for you to purchase and download through my website. I hope you enjoyed this episode of my Aliens APC build. If you did, please share with your friends, and make sure you subscribe to my channel. To learn about some of the techniques I use, check out my how-to series to find out more about moulding, casting, CAD design, and 3D printing. If you have any questions about this build, just leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching.